Have you ever wondered why sadness feels so heavy, as if it carries more than just the weight of today? What if the truth is that your sadness didn't begin here, in this moment, but long ago, in your childhood? Gabor Maté explains that most of what we call illness, whether depression, anxiety, addiction, or even physical disease, is not random, not genetic, but the echo of unresolved trauma. Trauma doesn't just hurt in the past, it shapes how we live, how we love, even how our bodies break down. And until we understand this hidden root, we'll keep treating symptoms while missing the truth. In this video, we'll uncover what really lies beneath emotional pain and how knowing it can set you free.
But I'm telling you, all of you who went to these specialists were there because of childhood trauma. Now, there are diseases that you can't put into that category. There are genetic diseases. If you have the gene, you'll have the disease. It's nothing to do with life or stress. It's just, although that can affect the course of it, but whether you get it or not is simply genetic. Those diseases are extraordinarily rare. Most diseases have little or nothing to do with genetic factors. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. There's one major source of illness, and I'm talking about any kind of illness, whether that's so-called mental illness or physical illness, and that's childhood trauma. And this is true whether I'm talking about anxiety, depression, ADHD, addiction, or if I'm talking about multiple sclerosis, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, and as I said, malignancy as well. And that seems like a very bold statement, but I'll be concentrating on the physical side of it. When I say physical side, I'm talking about the illnesses that are not considered to be mental illnesses. And it's quite okay, I wish you would argue with me, both in your mind and also verbally. That's the way we get through to the heart of things. I'll be saying to you that just about everything, not everything, but just about everything that we call illness is rooted in compensations and adaptations that have to do with childhood trauma. The adaptations that children are forced to resort to in response to early stress help them endure that early duress and difficulty, but those same adaptations become source of pathology later on and even threaten longevity. In order to understand the basis of that, we have to consider how we look at human beings, and how we look at disease. Now, Western medicine looks at disease from a particular perspective. And you have to understand something about medicine. It's science, all right, but it's also ideology. And there's a difference in science and ideology. There's a lot of science in it, and it's great science. But there's also ideology. And ideology is a point of view. It's the Germans say, it's a Weltanschauung. It's a worldview that you're not conscious of. That you have hidden beliefs that you don't question. And people that question the hidden beliefs are seen as outliers or mavericks. And that's an ideology. And that exists in all realms. So there's always ideological biases hidden in any system. And the logic of the system operates within those biases. Now, what are the biases of Western medicine? Well, the biases of Western medicine are, number one, that diseases have either physical causes in a sense of genes or external forces like bacteria or viruses or toxins, or we don't know what the causes are. So the causes are either physical or the disease is what we call idiopathic. We don't know what the source of it is. second bias is that diseases happen to organs. So you have heart disease, and you have lung disease, and you have disease of the connective tissue or the liver or whatever. And then there's specialties designated to study in depth the diseases of these organs. So we separate the organ from the whole person. And then we separate the person from the environment, so that the social environment, we might acknowledge the role of the physical environment, but we certainly not acknowledge the role of the social environment. In Western medical terms, the average physician would not be able to explain to you, and this is not for lack of intelligence, simply for lack of training, would not be able to explain to you why is it that the more episodes of racism a black American woman experiences, the greater her risk for asthma. It's just a documented fact. Nor would the average physician be able to tell you very easily the multiple times documented fact that children whose parents are stressed are more likely to have asthma. As a matter of fact, the degree of the child's asthma has been correlated with the degree of mental disturbance on the part of the parent. So you go to the physician, you get the inhalers, but that's all that happens. The human beings can't be separated from their environment. And what happens inside an individual on a physiological level is very much determined, or at least affected by what happens to them on a social level. So, nor would the average physician be able to explain to you, based on their training, why is it that if you look at lung cancer, the more adverse childhood experiences that you have, in other words, the more trauma you've experienced, the greater your risk of lung cancer, and this is true even if you cancel out smoking as a factor. Nor would the average physician be able to say a whole lot about the fact that a Canadian study showed that if you were abused as a child, your risk of cancer goes up by nearly 50%. And this is even after you've factored in or factored out things like smoking and drinking, which abused people are more likely to do. At the same time, human beings have always known, we've always known that things can't be separated. So there's always been this tussle, you might say, between a unitary, holistic view of human beings and existence in general, and a dualistic view that separates things. The Buddha said 2,500 years ago, he said, look at a leaf or a raindrop. And he says, and meditate. He says, meditate on all the conditions that are necessary for the existence of that leaf or raindrop. You look at a leaf, it contains the sun, the light, the photosynthesis. It contains the earth in the form of minerals, and it contains the sky in form of the water. So the leaf literally contains earth, sun, and sky. He says, the birth of any phenomenon, he says, is dependent on the birth of other phenomena. He says, without the many, there cannot be the one. Without the one, there cannot be the many. And that was the Buddha 2,500 years ago. And wonderful writer, Susan Griffin, in her really transcendent book, The Course of Stones, wrote that the story of one life cannot be told separately from the story of other lives. Who are we? The question is not simple. What we call the self is part of a larger matrix of relationships in society. All the lives that surround us are in us. There's a significant difference between an experience between a family physician and a specialist, in that the specialist certainly does know, and blessedly so, a lot about a certain organ and a certain system, but they don't know the patient. And by the time they see the patient's already sick, and usually they already have a diagnosis. At least we know what area the disease is. As the family physician, you get to see people before they get sick. So you know what their personalities are like for years before they get sick. And also you get to see them in the context of their families, including their multi-generational family of origin. Let me just ask you right now, how many of you in the last 5 years have been to a cardiologist, a neurologist, a gastroenterologist, a dermatologist, maybe I said rheumatologist, any kind of an ologist? Just put your hand up. Okay, great. All right. Now, put your hand up again if they asked you about childhood trauma. One person. That's great. If they asked you about stresses in your relationship with your spouse, about job stress, like a 5 to 10%, and that's really good if they asked you about it. And I wonder how long they took the discussion, but it doesn't even occur to them. But I'm telling you, all of you who went to these specialists were there because of childhood trauma. Virtually all of you. Now, there are diseases that you can't put into that category. There are genetic diseases. If you have the gene, you'll have the disease. It's nothing to do with life or stress. It's just, although that can affect the course of it, but whether you get it or not is simply genetic. Those diseases are extraordinarily rare. Like 1 in 10,000 of the population will have a disease like that. Most diseases have little or nothing to do with genetic factors. So these are then the patterns that I noticed in my clients. And by the way, when I said childhood trauma, probably some of you are at least internally shaking your heads because you're looking at your life, and I never had any trauma. Because it all depends on how you use the word trauma. And trauma, for me, and that's a whole other lecture, but trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. And things can happen inside you for which you don't need very dramatic events. But trauma essentially is a restriction of your capacity. It's a limitation. It's a constriction in the body. It's a constriction in your mental capacity to respond in the present moment from your authentic self. Essentially, trauma is a restriction of your authentic self in the present moment. That's what trauma is.
What Dr. Maté just shared is powerful. Trauma doesn't disappear. It reshapes us from the inside out. But there's another layer to this truth, one we often overlook. How our search for meaning, for truth, and even for spirituality can sometimes become a way of avoiding our deepest pain. In the next part, Dr. Maté dives into this idea, how addiction, illness, and even spiritual seeking are connected to the loss of our true self. Listen carefully, because what he's about to explain goes beyond medicine. It speaks to the very core of why we suffer and what it really takes to heal.
Well, it's Almas or Hamid Ali who stresses that in us there's an innate drive for truth. Truth not to liberate us, although it will. Truth not because it's interesting, although it is, but just truth for its own sake. And if I look at my own trajectory as a medical doctor and then writer, it's all about what is the truth of things. What is the truth of illness? What is the truth of addiction? What is the truth of mental health or mental illness? And of course, to deal with something and to help people with a problem, you have to know what the truth of that problem is. But I just find the truth in itself a value. And I would say that my own personal development has all been that search for truth. And of course, I've taken all kinds of detours and blind alleys have popped up and so on. But I really have been committed to truth. I can say that now with some satisfaction. Far from having attained it, I'm not saying I've got there. I'm just saying that that's been a motivative force behind both my personal work and my professional work. And I just find that intensely vital in a sense that it really is life-affirming and life-giving, and it releases all kinds of energies that I appreciate. First of all, I don't know what an Eckhart Tolle or Hamid Ali might say about this, or Ajashanti, But they might say something like, the seeking itself is a stance of deficiency, because you're saying you haven't got something. In other words, you're not in touch with your own wholeness. So you're creating more problems for yourself by positing yourself as a seeker. That's one way to look at it. I'm not sure that's what they would say, but I've heard similar statements. Seeking, as long as it's in the service of truth, is great. If it's in the service of certainty, it can be a limitation. So people can use that truth-seeking both to deepen their relationship to reality or to actually limit their relationship to reality. And I think it's a California-based Buddhist teacher, psychologist John Wellwood, who talks about what he calls a spiritual bypass. And I've seen a lot of people using a spiritual bypass to get away from themselves. So that the so-called spiritual seeking itself and the seeking of transcendent experience and the self-definition as a spiritual seeker can be a way of avoiding contact with their truer selves, even though it's being done in the name of contact with the truer self. And particularly in the realm of illness, and given my conviction and my findings over and over again, that illness is an expression of the avoidance of truth on the emotional level. Some people can displace dealing with their emotions by putting all their energy into finding the spiritual truth, and that's what I believe Wellwood calls spiritual bypass. And what that means is that those people will have beautiful deaths, but shorter lives. Because by not dealing with the emotional reality, they're disabling their immune systems and their hormonal apparatus, and they're interfering with the energetic expression of who they are, and with that means interfering with their cardiovascular system, their nervous system, and so on. So it all depends on what we mean by spiritual seeking. And we do have this separation, particularly in the West, of if we're spiritual seekers, does that mean we're not supposed to be angry anymore? Does that mean that we have to be serene all the time? Which is just a way of emotional repressing yourself. So I would regard myself as a spiritual seeker in the sense that I keep looking to people like Almas, like Adyashanti, to learn things from and to give me guides to understanding myself better, understanding my relationship to the world better. But at the same time, the work has to be done on multiple levels, and if it's only on the spiritual level, it can be a real restriction of our full experience. It's not radical to say that addiction is an expression of spirituality, but it's, again, a limitation to just put it that way. I think addiction has multiple dimensions. It's got physiological dimensions, emotional dimensions, social and relational dimensions, cultural dimensions, and certainly the spiritual one. Now, these are all related. It's not like there's here and there and there and there. These are all related. Fundamentally, in addiction, there's always significant emotional and psychic pain. So addictions are always an attempt to escape from pain based on life experience when we were vulnerable and helpless and small. It is also an expression, as a result of that early pain, we've become disconnected from our sense of unity and wholeness. So there's a spiritual void. So the addictions are an attempt to somehow satiate and fill that spiritual void. It works on many, many other levels. Certainly one can show that it works on a level of brain physiology, that there's certain disordered brain circuits that are both predate and are then exacerbated by continued addictive behavior. So it's, what I say about addiction is like you can only understand it if you take a really kaleidoscopic approach to it, and every time you see something, shake up the kaleidoscope again and look again. And you're going to see something different, but it's all going to be part of the larger picture. And again, spirituality, emotions, physiology, and many other factors all go into what addiction is. So on the spiritual level, certainly it's an emptiness and a disconnect from, not from belief, but from faith. And a lot of people with addictions have all kinds of religious beliefs, but they have no faith whatsoever. Because as soon as you have faith, what does that mean? It means that you're connected to Source, in which case, why do you need to add anything else to that? So genuine faith precludes addiction, and addiction means that there's no faith. But there can be all kinds of religious belief. Addiction is very much a modern phenomenon, and it has to do with dislocation. So when people are dislocated from their connection to themselves, from their connection to tribe, to culture, to clan, to society, from their land, from their home, that's when addictions happen. So there's been drinking in Western society for a long time, thousands of years as a matter of fact. I mean, drinking was known to the ancient Greeks, and there was cults around drinking even. The Dionysian cults involved a lot of drinking. But you can't say that there was much addiction on a social level, because you can drink and get drunk without being an alcoholic. And people would even use alcohol for spiritual purposes. So, or if you look at North America, you have the native population that used peyote in some areas, used alcohol in other areas, used tobacco almost universally, perhaps other psychedelic plants, but they were using them ceremonially. Now the ceremonial use of a substance is the direct opposite of its addictive use, because addictive use is all about seeking oblivion, seeking separation, seeking hiding from reality. Ceremonial use is about connection, about gaining more access to what's real and what's greater than the self. Addiction is all about serving the self or forgetting it. Ceremonial use is all about opening to a greater self. Now, why wasn't there addiction here in North America, even though there were substances here that could have been used as addictive outlets? Because dislocation hadn't happened yet. The biggest calamity is not what happened to you as a child, but that as a result of what happened, you lost the connection to yourself. So that lost connection to yourself will have many potential outcomes, one of which is addiction. It's not the only one, but certainly is one of them, one of the major ones. And it's always about separation from your essence, from other people, from society, from culture. The reason we suffer is because our true nature cannot be expressed under circumstances that deny our true nature. If we're wired for disconnect, we wouldn't suffer when we're disconnected. So it's just the opposite. We're wired for attachment, we're wired for connection, for belonging, for unity. That's how we're wired. And I think our suffering occurs when our true nature cannot manifest itself.
So if you've carried sadness, anxiety, or pain that never seemed to make sense, maybe now you understand. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't a flaw. It was the voice of your wounded inner child, still waiting to be seen. Dr. Gabor Maté reminds us that healing doesn't begin with running from pain, but by listening to it, by asking, "What happened to me?" instead of, "What's wrong with me?" Your story matters, your healing matters, and you are not alone in this journey. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to stay with us, to explore more, and to keep uncovering the truth together. Because the moment you see the root of your pain is the moment you begin to set yourself free. And before you go, comment, "I am healing to affirm your growth. You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone."